Hello, agentpreneurs, and welcome to episode 97 of the Daily List Report. We've got a wonderful show for you today. We've got Gia Goodrich coming on. She is a professional photographer, content creator, educator, and she's going to come on and talk to all of you about how to look really good on Zoom or any other digital service that you're on camera now, probably more than you ever thought you would be before. Now, we've talked a lot about this over many shows, right? Which is this idea about confidence. Nobody thinks they look good on camera. Nobody's first videos are any good. But what we can do is we can employ some of the tips from the professionals to make sure that we look as good as possible. And then Gia and I are going to talk a little bit about the confidence aspect of this and how you get comfortable being on camera, because it's more important than it ever has been before. So without further ado, what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring Gia on right now. Gia, why don't you say hello to the agentpreneurs of ListReports?
Hello! I'm so happy to be here and to share some of these tips and tricks that are like super easy and things that you have around the house that you can use to just like add that extra level of, sparkle and glow.
Absolutely. We can all use some sparkle and glow. Gia, I have up on the screen right now, I'm going to pull up for a second. This is Gia's Instagram page. She's Gia.Goodrich. We'll put a link to this in the comments below so you don't have to worry about remembering that. But she's got quite a following here on Instagram. You should definitely follow that. She's also active on YouTube. In fact, last night I watched this title video here, How to Look Better on Zoom, which is going to recap probably some of these things. So make sure you check out her page. We'll put a link to that as well, and subscribe to her channel. And hey, while you're there, why don't you consider subscribing to our channel and clicking the little bell to be notified of all of these episodes. Right, Gia? Did I do it right? Is that how you do it?
Yes, that's perfect. Always do the bell because you don't want to leave it to YouTube to determine what you want to watch.
That's right. That's right. We don't want the robots determining our future, right?
No.
We want to determine our own future. Gia, one of the things that I love to do is I love to give our guests the opportunity to introduce themselves. So, Gia, why don't you take a minute or two and let our guests know who you are and why you're great at what you do, and a little bit about what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am a photographer and director. That's mainly what I do. I work with commercial brands that are really trying to create a visual strategy to connect with consumers. But another part of what I do is work with a lot of founders, freelancers, entrepreneurs like yourselves, and really help them show up when it comes to video. Because, I would have said this before all of this COVID happened, which is a crazy moment in time for sure, but showing up and being able to create a context for who you are and what you do really creates that kind of connection where people are going to want to come back to you and trust you. And really, when you're doing that, you want to be the level and the quality to really match up with how you show up in the world. And for a lot of us, there's this big disparity between our superpower area and then some of these technology and the strategies that really help us show up in the best way. So that's where I come in. I love to help people feel more confident, know some of these tools that we use in the industry to really show up confidently, fully charismatically, and feel good about it. And also have like the beautiful light and background and all of that. So people are really impressed when you show up and they feel like you're someone that they can trust with their time and their energy and their business.
Absolutely, Gia. Really well said. And, here's the reality, right? We talked about this just in kind of some of the technical difficulties, frankly, we're having on this show right now, right? There's always something, right? So right now, the internet, frankly, isn't great, and your video isn't as sharp as I would love for it to be. But these are the realities that we have to deal with, right, Gia? We have to just roll with these punches. And so if we can take and employ some of these tips that you're about to give us, I think that's helpful. But Gia, before we do that, I want to talk just for a second about kind of what's going on right now, right? Sort of setting the groundwork or the underpinnings of this conversation, which is times are very different now, right? Most of us are not traveling, right? We're not visiting people face to face. And so we're doing more Zooms than ever, or whatever platform of preference that you have. And so we're on camera a lot more. And I hope that that's helping people gain sort of confidence and habituation of just being on video. But it's a really challenging thing, right, Gia? So I don't know, just sort of react to that. Talk a little bit about sort of the times that we're in, and likely, these times are going to continue in some way, shape, or form, which is probably we're going to have less travel. Pandemic aside, this is a very efficient way to do work, right? I'm at my house right now. Presumably you're at your home, right? And this is actually a very efficient way to do business. So can you just talk about any observations or an experience that you've had with this over the last few months?
Yeah, absolutely. For myself, I'm a commercial photographer and director. So when was this? In March, had my whole spring and summer booked out, lots of travel and all of these projects. And, with this all happening, it all just came crashing to a halt. And I think for a lot of us, we had to figure out how are we going to pivot. And for me personally, what I've realized is that there is so much opportunity in this space, and we don't actually know when things are going to go back to normal. And even after that, I think there are these lessons that we can glean from this moment in time where we're needing to shift hard into showing up in a digital way and using some of these other strategies that, we weren't thinking about. And in fact, a lot of my clients have said, well, we always thought we were going to do on demand and it was always a part of our thing, but we never got around to it. And sure enough, like this was the kick in the ass that got people to do it. So there's so much of a gift in what's happening now if we can train ourselves to see it, because once we go back to how things were or some iteration that's slightly different but is more akin to how we used to be, we'll now have this other skill set and this other ability to show up, find people, use targeted campaigns and things like that through ads so that people can really connect with us.
No, I think that's really smart, and I think that's absolutely true. Right? I've talked a lot about on this show, Gia, this idea that this is a time to innovate. This is a time to experiment, to try things that are new, right? To move out of your comfort zone. And because these times create opportunities, frankly. Right now, there's a massive migration happening. There's a lot of people who are leaving big urban areas for more suburban, even rural areas. And so as a real estate agent, there's actually opportunities that are created as a result of this. But
Absolutely.
why don't we jump into some of the tips, right? So you're a professional photographer, right? And you're not here to tell our agent community that they should go spend $10,000 on a camera body and all this lighting and crazy stuff. There's some simple things that everybody can do right now to make sure that they look their best on camera. So I'll let you take over for a few minutes, and why don't you take us through some of that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is one of the big misconceptions that we have is that the more money you spend, the better it's going to be. And really, you can have amazing gear, but if you don't really know how to use it, you're not going to get much out of it. And similarly, you can really work with what's available, what you have, and just knowing how to tweak it and fine tune things really create an aesthetic that works really well. Like me, for example, I have lots of lights, and I have lights that cost a lot of money that I use for commercial jobs. But right now, I'm just in front of a big window. And this is one of the things that most people have access to is a giant window. And you just get close. And as long as that light isn't coming directly through, like you can see the sun in your field of view, that big panel of light is the most flattering light a person can have on them, period. And what's funny to me is on set, a lot of times we'll be using lights that cost tens of thousands of dollars to try to approximate what we all have in our living rooms. Right. But I think for a lot of people, they're not thinking about that first. They're thinking about, where am I comfortable to sit? Where is my office currently located? And really shifting that thinking to how can I best show up? How can I get close to my window and really create a good light on my face? I think that's really a key place to start. And then building your work command station around that.
It's a really, really good point. What's interesting is even in my setup here, right? I've got lots of windows in this room. But to be honest, I'm actually not in front of a window right now, and I've struggled with the lighting, and it's a little bit of red tones and things like that, which would be totally different if I just was in front of that window that's right over there. And so You're right, reconfiguring your office to be able to do those things, and this idea that people spend tens of thousands of dollars on lighting to approximate what, like you said, most of us have accessible to us. So that's number one, right? Number one is get yourself in front of a window so that you can get that natural light. Now, you made another point there, which is this idea of sort of like diffused light, right? So you don't want the sun in your face per se. Do you use a sheet, like a very thin curtain, or what makes most sense there?
Yeah, so this is a great point. Diffusion is basically taking what you can think of as a single light beam and scattering it around. And what that does is it creates a kind of softness. So if you're close to your window and you're seeing what are called specular highlights or like a lot of hot spots, it usually means that the quality of light is a little too hard and you could use diffusion. Now, diffusion is just like a layer of something that's going to scatter the light. So it can't be 100% clear, but something where enough light can come through. So actually, my favorite hack that I actually made a video on YouTube about that is using a shower curtain. They have these frosted shower curtains that are semi-translucent, and those are great. You can just like tack it up and it creates this beautiful soft glow. Similarly, if you have curtains that are white, are great. The one thing to know is that whatever you're using for your diffusion, that color cast is going to come through. So if it's a little bit of a brownish, earthy, warm tone, you're going to get some of that quality, that color of light that's coming back to you. That's one thing that I see people do a lot, where they'll have like really cool blue curtains and then they'll put them in front and then it's like, whoa. And I think it's just important to understand that whatever quality and color you're putting in front is what's going to get back to you. But yeah, it's really easy. And like for me, for example, I don't have any curtains up right now. And it's because my window is facing the south. So the sun's moving this other way, so I'm not going to directly ever see the sun with my eyes, which just means that the light is already has a layer of diffusion to it because those beams aren't coming straight to me. And the bigger the window and the closer you are to it, the bigger that light source is, the more you have these angles that are the light's hitting you from different angles, and the more soft it's going to look overall, and the more flattering.
No, that makes perfect sense. Gee, I'm curious. I'm recording this on my iPhone 11 Pro, right? So I just have it set up on a little $12 tripod, right? And that's what I'm recording on. What are you recording your video on?
Yeah, well, right now I'm cheating just a little bit because I'm using my Canon camera that I photograph with, which is a Canon 5D Mark IV. But a lot of times I'm on my phone. A lot of times, if it's, we were actually talking about this off camera, that sometimes I speak on panels and things like that. And a lot of times I will use my lens on my camera. Wait, hold on, my lens on my camera. A lot of times I'll use my camera on my computer just to match with everyone else. But you can still use a lot of these principles of lights and angles to really make sure that even though the technology isn't as high as I could potentially have it, isn't as advanced, it still looks really good.
I think that makes sense. And in fact, I'm blanking on it, but there's a camera from Logitech. It's not dirt cheap, but I think it's around $200, and it's pretty remarkable. I'll have to find the name of it. So there are options, right? Somewhere between
and there are
what's built in
some.
and the fancy
What's really
one.
cool, another thing that's coming out of this is that there are a lot of little gadgets now. Like there are actually lights you can clip to your computer that can light you from the front. If you're doing something at night. And similarly, there are adjustments that you can make to your cameras on your computer to make them just a little bit higher quality. They're never going to reach the quality as something that is connected through a USB and feeding through it. But if you're willing to invest a little bit, I would say, yeah, $100, maybe $300 on the high end to be able to get a USB camera that you can put in the same position. It really does change the quality and makes people, my goal is to always have people go, ooh, because it just sets you apart, right? You're always thinking about, as your brand, as you, how can you edge out a little bit from the competition? How can you just show up just that extra amount? And some of these things are a lot easier than you think.
That makes sense. Okay, so Gia, we've got, get yourself seated in front of a window. If you have direct sunlight through the window, maybe put up a shower curtain or a thin white sheet. You could, I guess they can experiment with that. We've got the camera, which for most people is going to be their laptop camera or maybe their cell phone camera. What other tips can people do that are quick and easy and cheap?
Yeah, so the big no-no that I always see happening, and I actually, when I work with people, I have to really drill it into their minds, is not only do you want to think about the light sources that are in front of you, you want to think about what's behind you. And a lot of times what I see happening is you'll have somebody with a window a little bit behind them. And what happens is the sensor in our computers, it's constantly going back and forth, and it creates, it's called backlit when you have that kind of intensity behind you and that light coming back, and it's really straining on our eyes, and it, because of the sensor, it tends to make it more grainy as well. So really making sure that you don't have a lot of light behind you, or if you do, that it's pretty dim. That's the other, okay, this is another like trick technique that I love, is that if you have like this light source that I have right here, if you wanted it on, if I turned it on right now, it would be too bright. And a thing that you can do, they're usually like $15, is you can go to like a Home Depot and Ace Hardware, and you can get just a little dimmer, and you just connect it to the outlet, connect it to the light, and then you can dial it down. So if you do want a little bit of ambiance or something like that in your background, that's a really great way to control it, to make sure that it's not blowing out and creating that backlit effect that's really straining for us.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. So let's talk about the background a little bit, right? I started this show at home. You know, I didn't redo my office for this, so I've got stuff everywhere behind me, right? But there's a big difference actually between my background and your background, right? Your background has a very sort of flat look to it, right? It's not distracting. You're sort of front and center here, which I think is really interesting. I have an angle in this room, right? And I've got a crazy bookshelf with a bunch of stuff on it. So, you know, what do you recommend? I like the look that you have. It's well lit. It's like, it's fairly flat in a good way, and you sort of pop in the middle. But, you know, how should people be thinking about the background in addition to the lighting tip that you just gave?
Great question. First, I would say lead with light, and then you figure out what's behind you. So for me, the biggest, best window in my place, there's a wall maybe like 9 feet away back here. So I immediately knew that, okay, my background is going to be more flat. Typically, when you're thinking about what adds a lot of dynamic elements, thinking about depth is good, as long as there's enough light in the background that you don't just 100% fall out into darkness, which can happen at night a lot. But if you do have a flat background, the one thing I would say, see, what's funny is you totally caught me, Randy, because I 100% staged this, because this, for this, I thought about it, not this interview specifically, but for these types of meetings that I'm having, is thinking, okay, I need to have a way that I can show up. And the one thing is that with us getting used to seeing people on Zoom, what we actually kind of like is feeling like we're seeing a little bit into their life. So you don't want to put yourself against a wall where it's just white, and you want to create enough separation that you can see things in the background, but you're still the main star of the show. So I treated it like a set. And I put some shelves back here, and then just put a couple things on there, like this is an essential oils diffuser and a lamp, and then there's a little camera here and a couple books, and then this is actually more of my life right here. I think I have pens and things like that. So if I were to pull back, my space right here is crazy, because I have gear from yesterday. I have all of this kind of stuff that's just off camera. So what I really did strategically is think about what's going to show up and how can I give just enough that people feel like they're seeing a little bit into my space, into my world, but keep it simple enough that still the focus is on me.
Yeah, no, I think that makes perfect sense.
Yeah, it's totally fakery, because
yes.
I set it up for this, and then like now these are great. These are just from IKEA, and so now I'm like, oh, I could actually put things in there. I should actually put things in there.
That's amazing. Okay, so Gia, so we've got, you know, the window, we talked about camera, we've talked about kind of the background. What other are there any other weird hacky things that people can be doing to make sure they maximize the quality of how they look on camera?
Definitely. The other thing to really think about is angle. And this is something I see a lot of people doing, is they will just put their computers where they would normally work, which is quite low. And then what you're doing is, what's that?
It drives me crazy. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, and then what you see is all up into the chin area, all of this good stuff, because what's happening is you're rocking back the angle to be able to see you, and then you're getting this really foreshortened, distorted view. The thing to know about video and the way everything works is that whatever is closest to the camera is going to be bigger. So when you're angling something, you're angling the tip of the lens further away. What ends up being closer is anything toward the bottom, and what's closer to the top, your top of your head, for example, gets really small. So you'll start to see these really distorted perspectives where people look like they have giganto chins and then little teeny face and forehead. So the thing to think about is that first you want to lift it up so it feels like it's approximating where you would naturally look if you were just sitting like a normal human being. But then secondly, you want to make sure that the angle isn't too crazy. So if you look at me right now, pretty much everything feels in proportion. The only thing that wouldn't is when I start talking with my hands, right? Because my hands, when I talk with them, are a good, 7 inches closer to the camera. So you can see they look way bigger here than they do here. So you want to make sure. So one thing that I've actually started doing since doing a lot of these Zooms is using my hand gestures closer to my body.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Gia, to that point is sometimes I have this habit of like getting close to the camera and then it kind of distorts and fisheyes a little bit. But I have this habit of, getting into the camera and saying something.
Oh, right. Yeah, absolutely. Which is fine if you're like, hey, I just want to pull in for a second and get a little you and me right here. But so see how I'm not really tilting my face too much, but already my forehead looks huge, because the closer you get, the movements show a lot of distortion the closer you are to the lens. So you just want to make sure if you come in that your face is pretty flat and you're like, hey, da-da-da-da-da, and then pulling back and getting more into where you would eat.
Oh, it makes sense. By the way, Gia, I'm fond of telling people that, the big forehead, because I have it right here, is where we store extra brain. So it's just smarter.
I always say I have a 5 head, and that's I don't actually have, I'm going to say that. It's storing extra brains.
That's pretty extra brainies. So if this isn't clear, because my tripod here is very portable, right? What Gia's talking about is you see people come on camera and they're just like, sometimes they're like this, they're like this, you get all these weird angles. And so try to get it as level as possible to sort of, the conversations that you would normally have with somebody. That makes perfect sense.
Yes, and just remember that the closer you are to the camera, the more there's going to be distortion just anyway because of the way the lenses are made. So the more extreme it's going to feel. So when you're thinking about like you're talking on your phone, just remember the selfie. We all know what people look like when they're making selfies and they pull their phones way back. It's because that distance and that height is optimal. And it's really easy for us. We have all these tools to just play around and really figure out what works for you, because the difference in your faces, the difference in your physique is going to really determine those micro adjustments where you'll look the best. But thinking generally, some of these principles will really be helpful.
I think that's awesome. Any other kind of tips and tricks? You had this thing, I don't know if you want to talk about it. You had like a bounce. I don't know. You had something on your keyboard.
Oh, yeah. I actually took it off for the mic, but this is a great tool. This is just from a craft store. And these are silver on this side, and the other side is white. So, of course, white is going to be softer than silver. And this is something you can just get at a craft store, or you can take a piece of cardboard and just wrap it in tin foil. But if you look at the way it's bouncing light into my face right now, it's a little extreme. These can be really helpful if you're having really directional light. And what you can do is just put it up here, and it adds this extra glow. And of course, you want to make sure that it's not in the frame, which mine is right now because I have something underneath there. But you can just see that it adds this extra luminous quality. It's also a great way if you are not having as much light as you'd like, if it's an overcast day, because it really doubles the amount of light that comes in.
Yeah, it works really well. And just to double down on your point about lighting, even as you were moving it and the light was bouncing, right, the light on you was changing. Like, it has a really significant impact.
Yeah, and the thing to know is that the silver side is going to reflect the most. And a white side is going to be softer. So you can do the same thing with the white side if you want to just bring a little bit of fill back in. It's very subtle, but it really can just add that little bit of oomph to the situation. The last thing I really want to talk about that is super important is light temperature.
Oh, yes.
This I go into a little bit more in one of my videos, but when you are thinking about recording at night, and you've probably seen this where people start to look a little more orangey, Oompa Loompa-esque.
That's me. I feel like I look like an Oompa Loompa. That's exactly how I look right now. It drives me crazy.
Yeah, it's a thing. And really a lot of times where it comes from is light temperature, which it's one of these things that unless you're really in the industry, we don't think about that much because our eyes compensate for the different light temperatures so easily. But our technology really doesn't. So when you think about a fire light and the light that it creates on your skin, that's really warm. And then when you think about going into the afternoon sun, that light is really cool. Or even cooler is right before sunset and after the golden hour. But that light temperature, we have this spectrum. And when we're talking about the light bulbs that are usually in our homes, they're called tungsten lights. They're these really yellow, amber kind of lights. If you are lighting yourself for Zoom with a light bulb that is balanced that way, that's warmer, it will give you that super orangey vibe. All you have to do is just go to the store and get one that says daylight balanced or white light. Those will have a kind of cooler tone to them. And then you'll come back and your skin tone will read a little more accurate. But it's a really big thing because we have such strong connotations to color and we know what skin color should be. So when you see somebody who looks a little green or looks a little orange, there's a part of our brain that wants to pay attention, but really is on some other place like, ooh, are they like, what's kind of going on there? So that's and it's a super easy fix too. So just being aware of that and really switching to daylight bulbs. The one thing to know about that though is that they aren't great for your eyes long term. So it's actually great for your eyes to have in your homes those warmer tones because it helps with our circadian rhythms. But using it for this purpose and just turning it on when it's necessary and lighting yourself again from the front. If you're bringing a lamp, bringing it in from the front, that will really create that beautiful light on your face.
Oh, that's wonderful. I love it. Those are great tips. Gia, let's talk a little bit about this class that you have coming up here, right? This is about confidence, and this is a really big deal, right? Is confidence. Most people just do not have the confidence to be on camera. I'll tell you, even for myself, I'm a very extroverted, outgoing person. I love speaking in front of real humans, real people. But it took me a while to get used to looking at this camera, looking at basically the back of my iPhone and having these conversations, which feel like I'm having them with myself in part of the time. It just takes time. But talk a little bit about your class, and then I'm going to pull up the link that you sent over here in just a second after you're done.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is one of the big common problems that we have is we all know that we're cool, interesting people. That's evidenced by the friends that we have and the family that we have and all of that goodness. Like, we're awesome people. But really, when it comes to showing up on video, it's this extra layer of translation where a lot of people get hung up. There are two main archetypes, let's say, for how people can show up on video that are suboptimal. One is the salesperson, that's the talk show host. It's like, hey, how are ya? How are things going? Where it sounds like this newscaster and it doesn't feel real and authentic. The other way is really where you see people, their nerves and their criticality are driving the car. So they're really talking, like you can just see in their body language, they're maybe a little bit breathy. They are not looking at the camera at all, or when they do, they have the big deer in the headlight eyes. And that all of that stuff is totally fixable. And there are a few, I'll even share one technique that, of course, all of this is going to be in the course, but there's one technique that's super easy to just wrap your mind around. And especially when we think about looking at the lens, because it is this weird vacuous space, sometimes you can see a reflection, is just to take a beat, as we say in acting, you take a beat, take a breath, and imagine that it's a friend. Now, it needs to be a very specific person. And if you're thinking about your clients, you can think about a client that you've had that you really have a great relationship with, and it's easy to talk to this person, and they just may not know the thing that you're going to share. And when you think about that person, it creates this softness in your face, it creates this ease in your body, and it allows you to just speak like a human in a way that people can really connect with that energy.
That makes a lot of sense. So Gia, I'm going to pull this up in a second, but when is the class available? How is it going to work?
Yeah, the class is launching on a brand new platform called Lemonade, which is designed specifically for founders, freelancers, entrepreneurs to really gain these suite of skills across a lot of different disciplines. And mine is on video. It should be out by the end of the month. And so what I did is I created a link for everyone so that they can be first to be notified. So you can register for that. And then as soon as the class goes live, I'll send a link directly to your inbox so you can check it out.
Perfect. I just pulled that up right here. Again, we'll link to this in the description and the comments. It's GiaGoodrich.com. You can definitely go there and check out Gia's website, GiaGoodrich.com/daily list report, which is this show right here. So thank you for doing that for us. You can register for early access and you'll get notified, which I think is going to be tremendous. And honestly, Gia, just having this conversation with you, you're so delightful. You're so passionate about this. I'm sure it's going to be an amazing class.
Thank you. Well, I always say this, that really you can do the work, but if you can't create a context for who you are, if you can't emanate with your eunice so people can gravitate toward you, you're missing something. Your business is never going to be as full, right? You're always going to be hustling, trying to find the next clients. But if you can become a magnet for people who resonate with your energy, they share your values, it just grows your business exponentially and your power. You become an authority in the space. And really learning these tools with video, I firmly believe, because I've done it myself, is the best way to really harness that power. Because I never really would have thought this was the case, but I have people from all over the world that reach out to me in my inbox, and they'll tell me these stories that like we're best friends. And I love that. And there's a part of me that's like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. But it's because I've been able to communicate as me. And they can see that and they can resonate with that energy. And I firmly believe everyone can do that. We just need to unpack and move through some of these stumbling blocks that a lot of us have in our way.
I couldn't agree more, Gia. Very well said. Gia, thank you so much for taking time today to talk to all of our agents out there. These are such wonderful, practical tips that they can start employing right away.
Absolutely. This was so much fun for me to do, and I am sending all of you the most light and love and energy and ability to rock your individual, unique charisma and badassery, and I can't wait to see what you make of it.
Oh, I just got goosebumps there. I felt it. It came right through the camera. Gia, thank you so much. What a pleasure to meet you, and I hope we get a chance to talk to you again real soon.
Absolutely. Thanks, Randy.
All right. So there you have it. What an amazing guest. My goodness. I'm so glad I got to meet Gia. I feel that energy, and she exudes that, and she's given a lot of great practical tips that I think all of you can start with right away, right? Get your desk in front of a window, right? Get a curtain if you need it. Use a piece of plasterboard or the mirror one, whatever it's called, but we'll put all of this stuff in the comments in the description. So lots of really practical tips. Definitely check out her course that's coming up, because confidence, I think, is one of the biggest blockers of people adopting these things. Is you just don't feel like you look right or whatever. And all of these things boost confidence. When you're lit properly, you're going to look in the camera, you're going to be like, wait a second, that's me. And it makes a massive, massive difference. So really excited about that. Thank you so much for watching. Again, make sure you check out Gia's YouTube page. I got that up here right now. Again, we're going to link to that as well. She's got some great videos on there. A lot of them she referenced right here in the show today. And then also definitely follow Gia on Instagram. Lots of amazing content there, and she's a super delightful person, so she's our kind of people. All right, well, I hope you enjoyed today's show. Until tomorrow, be safe, be healthy, be happy, and let's get some of that light coming through. I can't say it as well as Gia did, but what she said. We'll see you soon.